We're going to explore a skill that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the BA world. It's called storytelling. Now, you might think storytelling belongs to authors, marketers, or keynote speakers. But here's the truth. As a business analyst, your ability to tell stories will make or break your effectiveness. It's not enough to gather requirements. You have to make people feel the problem, see the vision, or buy into the journey. I've seen brilliant solutions stall because no one cared enough to champion them. And I've seen the most modest improvements fly through the approval process just because someone framed them as a powerful story. So in this episode, we'll be breaking down 10 ways narrative shapes better outcomes for BAs.
The Better Business Analyst Institute
presents the Better Business Analyst Podcast with
Benjamen Walsh.
Welcome back, everybody. In this episode, I'll share practical tips and real-world examples and even a few hard-learned lessons along the way from my own project to talk about why every BA needs to have Storyteller in their toolkit. Let's get started. Number one, the BA is the translator, which you would have heard about, and the story. At its core, BA work is about translation from business needs to technical specifications, from strategy to day-to-day impact. Storytelling is actually that bridge. On one project at Z Energy, technical teams kept talking APIs and integration layers, and in some cases, some very old COBOL code. The business glazed over. I reframe this as, think of this like a petrol pump. The nozzle, the hose, and the pump are all connected. APIs are those connectors for your system. Suddenly, the business stakeholders understood. I was using their language, something they were familiar with. Always ask, what story am I here to tell? Frame technical detail and business narrative. Number two is to use narrative arcs in workshops. I'm not particularly good at this, and this is a skill that I want to get better at. Good workshop isn't a meeting. It's a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, or resolution. At the Ministry of Education, I managed kind of messy design workshop around a dashboard before. People were semi-engaged, it depends on how they felt on the day, and I reframed it as, here we are, here's the tension, right? We all have different disagreements. That's okay. What we want to do is come together and achieve the following goals. And I even actually did some work beforehand, and I used the Power Start model to achieve that. You can Google that, and it's actually really good at prepping while we're there. But despite that, people were still moving in different directions. You need to design your workshops with a cliffhanger in the middle. You need to create tension, good tension, then guide the group through to resolution. And the worst thing, just as another tip here, is if you run out of time. You may run out of time, but you need to make sure you always have time to a natural close, because people hate stories that never finish. Number three, turning requirements into user journeys. Dry requirements don't inspire. A user journey tells the same information as a story. Instead of listing system requirements or business requirements, I actually mapped out kind of journey from beginning to end when we were implementing a CRM system at New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. It highlighted pain points in a way that requirements documents never will. Convert lists into stories, as we know about, but also add visual storytelling cues, just like an illustration in a children's book. It actually works. When you build things down to simple books or statements, use the Wiggles model, which is a popular TV panel here, but think of Teletubbies or whatever you've got in your country, Barney. Very simple stories. That's actually how you should articulate your requirements. And it's not about saying that the people that you are teaching are children. It's the fact that if you say it simply, they'll understand and you can reinforce it. The other thing is making benefits real. This is number 4. Executives don't care about who efficiency gains. They care about what that means in people's lives or the bottom line. At the use of care inquiry, benefits had to be framed around the survivor experiences, right? Not around process efficiency, not even the collecting of information, which is why we were there to produce a report. Storytelling made benefits real, not abstract, okay? It really helped these people, these survivors of terrible abuse, actually have a better experience when dealing with the inquiry. Always connect benefits to human impact and not percentages. Now, I harp on about the fact you need to have smart objectives, that's fine, but when you're telling that story, say why, and the why, it allows you to talk about the actual story behind those statistics. There's also number 5, which is the power of metaphors. You can do this badly, but give it a go. A metaphor can do the heavy lifting of 20 PowerPoint slides. In a project at Genesis Energy, instead of explaining that we needed to implement the electronic marketing act that was coming in, we needed to elect whether or not people wanted to receive marketing material, and we needed to integrate it into the customer call flow. Instead of explaining that, I actually used an example around the fact that someone might knock on your door and try and sell you something. And that was the same example. You're effectively knocking on the door. Imagine that someone who's selling a vacuum cleaner knocking door to door, and that person needs to have the opportunity of not listening to them if they didn't want to, or subscribing and listening. And so that gave it a good example, just a metaphor around why it was really important for people to have that question asked and for us to collect that information and respect them. Build a bank of metaphors you can draw from, okay? They're your BA superpower. I don't use them enough, so I'm telling you, and I'm going to tell myself to do better at it. Number 6 is around that stakeholders. You can gain empathy with them through storytelling, and that's about understanding them as people and what they do. The best way to win over resistant stakeholders is to tell them a story from their perspective. At Hamilton City Council, I dealt with planners, and it was around changing and capturing some information around building consents. And I tried to just explain to them, imagine if you're a ratepayer trying to lodge a consent at 11 p.m. at night instead of queuing the next day at your desk. Resistance gets dropped because then they appreciate that actually people want to do this outside of their work hours. Always run what's their story exercise before engaging with stakeholders. Number 7 is data as a character in the story. Data is neutral. Treat it like a character with a role in your story. We captured data information at the Tertiary Education Commission here, presenting the idea around students and people who were looking for work. And we used data around the fact that people who were out of work for more than 6 months, their motivation completely crashed. It was very hard to get them back on the either learning journey or getting back into work. So you should humanize data, and you should show the faces behind those data if you can with your personas. And it really helps when you're trying to tell a story. The other part that I've used storytelling to some degree is storytelling in business cases. So treasury, boards, executives, they see dozens of cases, but the memorable ones are the ones with a story. When I was at the Ministry of Education, we framed the business case not around, individuals trying to access information, but really what were the frontline staff getting out of the system. Okay, it wasn't just about process improvement. It was around fixing broken pipes and having a pipe of information. When you write the case, write the first draft as a story, especially in the executive summary and at the end, before you translate it into corporate template language. Number 9, of course, which is my favorite, which is using visuals and storyboards. Sometimes the best story isn't words at all. It's a visual sequence. Analyzing designs, we use storyboarding, when we did, use a digital experience design, use the comic book form, draw comic books. They work really well. It helps get everyone online, helps with jobs to be done. Don't be afraid to sketch, even if your stick figures look terrible. They can tell a story faster than bullet points. And you'll see if you ever work with me, I always have a whiteboard and a whiteboard pen with me. And I tell you what, my writing is terrible, but I can draw a picture. Number 10 is your BA career as a story. Storytelling isn't just for projects. It's about how you position your career. When I pivoted from local government to telco to the private sector back to the private government, I framed my story journey as a translation between complexity and clarity, whether it was the school or the city I was working in or moving overseas to Europe, the UK. That got me in the door. And effectively, this podcast is a storytelling exercise. Craft a personal narrative that ties together your career leaps, your background, your passions. Don't just list roles. Tell a coherent story. And that will get you in the door places that you may have not thought that you could get into. So there you have it. 10 ways storytelling makes you a better business analyst. If you only take one thing away from today, it's requirements, processes, and models are important, but they'll never move people to act on their own. Stories do that. Stories make people hear, align, and connect. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll catch you next week.